Yesterday's question period was dominated by fiery exchanges during which the opposition accused the government of outright lying when it said it never had one credible example of an Afghan captured by Canadians and transferred to the Afghans who was then tortured or abused. They pointed to an incident in May 2006 in which an Afghan taken prisoner was transferred to the military police, and the Afghan military police then proceeded to beat him so severely the Canadian forces had to intervene and take him back into custody. Now, that was also corroborated by a Globe and Mail which produced some field reports from a Canadian soldier. But today, Canada's top soldier, General Walt Natynczyk, appeared before the Defence Committee of the House of Commons, and he produced a different version. He said he had spoken with everyone involved in the incident, and that the reality was that that Afghan was never taken into custody by the Canadians. And he said it was only Canadian intervention which prevented that man from being further abused.
The bottom line up front, the event of June of 2006 happened on the battlefield. So this was not an event that happened back at Kandahar with regard to transfer. This was not a transfer to a prison, and the Canadian forces did the right thing. Those are the 3 points I want to make right up front. Based upon the soldiers' assessment, they had no interest in the individual. But the Afghan police are there, and the Afghan police see different things for whatever reason. The Afghan police decided to take this person under custody. They took this individual off. Now, we didn't take this person under custody, but what we did on the ground was just basic routine questioning, as we do to thousands, so that we ensure that we don't take people who could be innocent. Now, the Canadian Forces members on the ground, again, looking to those strategic privates and corporals. When the Afghan police took this individual away, they got kind of suspicious. They said, And so they went to check on what was going on. And that's where they saw that the Afghan police were beating the individual with their shoes. They intervened. This is courageous here now, because I remember speaking to folks on who were there. Courageous actually take control of this individual. Called in the military police at that time. The notes you see are from the military police who were called in at that time, who then took the individual and went through the processing. So it goes to what the individuals did on the ground at the time. It was the right thing in terms of handling this individual.
Here's what's happened. Canada's Chief of the Defence Staff has done an incredible about-face. General Walt Natynczyk called a news conference today to correct testimony he gave yesterday before a parliamentary committee about a detainee who was beaten by Afghan police in June of 2006. At the committee, Natynczyk insisted the man was never in Canadian custody. But today, the general said a report uncovered by his staff reveals that the prisoner was indeed captured by the Canadians and turned over to Afghan police. And that report suggests the Canadian soldiers were very aware that prisoners were being abused by the Afghan security services.
In May of 2007, I issued a statement related to the events of 14 June 2006 of an incident that took place on the battlefield during combat operations in the Panjwai district of Afghanistan. Yesterday, I reiterated that information at the Standing Committee on Defence, that the actions of the Canadian Forces or surrounding the Canadian Forces personnel that intervened to safeguard an individual that the Afghan National Police had in custody when they saw something was not right. This morning, at about 9 o'clock, I was briefed by my staff who have been researching the case just to ensure the completeness of all the information that we've been using, especially surrounding the most recent report that we saw in the Globe and Mail on Monday. Today, they provided me with a statement of actually the section commander. And when I read that report, I realized it was not totally consistent with the operations report and the information provided to me by the chain of command. I want to correct my statement made to SCON yesterday and indeed in May of 2007. This new information presented to me sheds important details on what occurred on that day on the 14th of June. The individual who was beaten by the Afghan police was in fact in Canadian custody and then the ANP took control of him to facilitate his movement from the battlefield to Forward Operating Base Wilson. The statement written by the section commander of the day indicates that they stopped and searched the vehicle. There were 3 individuals in a white van, and they got a very weird feel from one of them. Had the interpreter along, and he verified that an individual was in all probability enemy, Taliban, due to his accent and his false story about being from Kandahar City. So I had him lie down on his stomach and then conducted a detailed search. I had him empty his pockets prior to this, catalog all the items, and then took down his particulars. And I won't mention his name. We then photographed the individual prior to handing him over to ensure that if the Afghan National Police did assault him, as had happened in the past, that we would have a visual record of his condition. The Afghan National Police section commander, and again I won't mention the name, then arrived and asked the suspect a couple of questions, concurred with our assessment that the individual was enemy. We, in good faith, handed the PUC, or the person under custody, over to them so that they could, so that he could be transported to the Zari District Center, Forward Operating Base Wilson, where Watchdog, which is military police, could get to him. And I assume that means process him there. That was the last that I saw him. That is the statement of the sergeant. Now, I did not have this information in May of 2007, nor yesterday when I made my statement. But I am responsible for the information provided by the Canadian Forces, and I am accountable for it today. I intend to investigate why it took so long for this information to get to the Chief of Defence Staff, both my predecessor and I. Nonetheless, I accept the military police report to be accurate. I am proud that our soldiers acted courageously and ethically when they retrieved the individual from the Afghan National Police when it was apparent that he had been injured. That's the kind of decisive action soldiers make on a battlefield, and I'm proud of our soldiers. I'm open for your questions.
So, I mean, people have been reluctant to call it a cover-up. I'm wondering if inside the military, and as you've gone through your forensic investigation on your own in the last few weeks, are you concerned that information flow inside the military during this period of time was lacking?
Now, you got to keep in mind that this is happening on an active battlefield. You've got an organization that is in 3 separate fights. At least that's what the colonel indicated to me. Our microscope is on this event, but you have section commanders, platoon commanders, company commanders, battalion commander focused on a complex battlefield. And so this perception that one would have that are people misrepresenting it, no. What you have is a duty officer trying to collate all this information that's coming in and provide as accurate information as he can up. And so it's difficult sifting through all this information. And again, I would say, on behalf of the soldiers and sailors and airmen and women doing this business, they're doing the best they can. But I would not put any kind of a malicious intent, as your question inferred.
Now that you've seen this report, does it constitute evidence of torture or abuse of Canadian detainees, and has the military not left its minister hanging out to dry?
Clearly, an individual who was in custody of the Canadian Forces, and the Afghan police assumed custody, that individual was abused. And I am responsible for providing that information.
And the second part of my question about, have you left the minister hanging out to dry? Are you apologizing to him? What?
You know, I regret that I only have this information at this point. You know, I looked at my watch too at 9:06 this morning when I received this report, and I thought, my goodness, why have I not had this information? Why didn't we have this information back in 2006? in 2007. And again, having looked at all the reports coming back to Ottawa, they reflected the operations summary of that day.
A document suddenly turning up the day after you testified and struggled with some tough questions would only confirm suspicions in many people's minds of a cover-up.
Again, I want to know why it took 2.5 years since the 4th of May when I made this statement on behalf of the Canadian Forces, why it's taken so long to have this information come to me.
We've had one story, then another story. We've had the Minister of Defense claiming no credible allegations of detainee abuse were ever sent, and then we've got the Canadian military showing clear evidence in field notes that a detainee was abused, and then they say, well, he wasn't a Canadian detainee, and now General Natinchuk saying, well, after all, he was a detainee. This just doesn't add up. Canadian forces need to have very clear standards for detainee transfer. It's a matter of the honor of our forces.